folks, I'm Emily, but that's just the name I was given. I am the sum of all of my experiences, thoughts, interests, and everyone I have ever known. And so are you. And if you're watching this, whether you like it or not, I am now a part of you as well. If you're confused, good. But bear with me because all will be revealed in good time.
So if you're watching Steve, waiting for you.
Our individual sense of identity is a concept that I find endlessly fascinating. What makes two siblings who grew up in the same home with the same parents feel so differently about themselves? Why do some experiences impact some people's sense of self, but not others? We talk a lot in the mental health field about bolstering self-esteem, and we have some pretty replicable ways of making that happen. But then why are some people seemingly naturally confident about their ability to achieve success? We have some ideas for answers to these questions, but even then, the answers can differ for any given individual. As for myself, early life circumstances did temporarily strip me of some of the confidence that I was born with. I am still working on getting that back. And I think it's really crucial for us all to remember that we can change how we view ourselves at any point in time. Since I can remember, I have struggled with perfectionism. Shocking, I know. And as anyone who has done some work around that knows, perfectionism does absolutely nothing to get anything done, let alone perfectly. Perfectionism mostly involves a lot of procrastination and redoing things that were already done perfectly adequately to begin with. This is my second attempt at recording this video, and my third revision of the script. I have futzed around with this for over a year. So whatever you get is what you're getting, because I am not doing it again. Perfectionists have a tendency to focus in on details that most overlook. And while this may initially sound like great attention to detail, perfectionists often get lost in the sauce of details that matter to absolutely no one. Most people are self-focused, including the perfectionist. Most tend to be concerned with how they are showing up and are able to overlook others' imperfections. Yet, this does not stop the perfectionist from considering all of the angles on how a slight, or not so slight, imperfection may make them look in the grand scheme of things. If I get a B+ in this class, will I die penniless? Real thought I've had. And the answer is, you can die penniless with straight A's, baby cakes. So don't worry so much. I am baby cakes in this analogy, evidently. I have worked so hard to stop that cycle within myself. And we can all stop that cycle. But it involves allowing ourselves to show up imperfectly. Our imperfections are part of us. And in order to show up authentically, we have to stop hiding them. And frankly, does hiding them ever really work? I know for myself that if I tried to hide any of my perceived flaws, they have a way of sneaking out, and then I end up sitting up at night wondering, how did I get it wrong? A beautiful portrayal of how we define success for ourselves and how that impacts self-image can be seen in the 2006 film Little Miss Sunshine. The first frame consists solely of Olive's big blue eyes shielded by her glasses. We see reflected in those glasses footage of Miss America's past winners. When the frame expands, we see Olive holding her stomach. She repeatedly rewinds the footage to study the winner's reaction as she proceeds to practice this for herself. Cutting through this footage is the words of her father.
There are two kinds of people in this world, winners and losers.
He is revealed to be a buy my course motivational speaker. Something, I really thought would die out in the age of the internet, but here we are. That is definitely a cesspit for another time. Her father delivers this speech with all the passion and bravado of a Tony Robbins. But this message obviously falls flat without the kinetic energy of a packed audience. Or, arguably, through the parasocial connection of a computer screen. As it is revealed that the father is talking to a classroom of 10 adults of varying levels of interest. The father tries to shield his disappointment in himself, in his reception, and in his life. We then flash to Dwayne lifting weights under a tapestry of Nietzsche's face. We see him complete a regimen of basic exercises and that he is counting down the days to something that is yet to be revealed. The grandfather locks himself in the bathroom to snort H. God, I hate YouTube guidelines. Mom smokes a cigarette while driving, all the while arguing with her husband about her brother needing a place to stay. She arrives at the hospital where we see Frank, sitting in a wheelchair in a hospital gown. We learn that Frank is in the hospital after attempting to take his own life. This film is perfect and gorgeous, and it has only been 4 minutes. Cheryl insists on Frank staying with Dwayne as orders from the hospital state that he cannot be alone at night. Dwayne is wearing an Obey t-shirt featuring Big Brother, which is just funny given the context, and I wanted to point it out. We learn that Edwin and Olive are rehearsing. Dad is hoping for a book deal. Dwayne does not talk.
Big because of Friedrich Nietzsche.
More specifically, a vow of silence until he reaches his goal of being able to join the Air Force Academy. When we watch this movie, or at the very least when I watch this movie, I really hope you have this experience. You are acutely aware that you are watching a portrayal of something universal. Something every human being on the planet faces in one way, shape, or form. The strive for success, self-esteem, of confidence. One school of thought that I have found helpful as a framework is Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And I emphasize framework because we cannot live here. It is not solid, but it is an interesting starting point. When we look at the characters within Little Miss Sunshine, we can see the existential questions of each stage played out within them. The film reflects larger truths about how we become who we are. The youngest character in the film is Olive at 7 years old. But we can go younger, not necessarily with any of the characters in the film, but in general, with a hypothetical person. Anyway, if we were to meet a baby, typically, hopefully, they do not hate themselves. Everything they do is valid. They have no thoughts about the ramifications of their actions. Puke on you, mess themselves, throw things in your face. Absolutely not a care in the world. As we grow older, we are taught not to engage in these behaviors. And being told not to mess ourselves in public is most of the time a perfectly good idea. No problems there. And I say most of the time because some folks suffer from this lesson, particularly, usually, in the way it is taught, or for those folks who are less in control of their bodily functions. There are always exceptions for all of these things. Anyway, as we grow older, we are told more and more things we should and should not do. We are taught how to behave in certain settings and how to be a good member of society. In a happy, healthy home, there are typically few problems here. Children are taught the ideal rules for society. Be kind, don't harm others, etc. But for others, these early learning messages can include lessons on how not to be yelled at, how to remain lovable, useful, and unharmed. In those settings, children learn how to survive in a world that will not accept them for who they are. A world that demands they hide certain parts of themselves. We can see from how the way Richard talks to the children that this is a struggle within their home. We do not know how the first 3 stages of development were wrestled with within that home, but somehow Olive and Dwayne made it through them successfully and gained the virtues of hope, will, purpose, and for Dwayne, competence, which Olive will also gain by the end of the film. Something I did not know before embarking on this video was that Dr. Erikson spent time studying the Sioux and Yorick people, much like a Dr. Maslow did with the Blackfoot. So I get a little suspicious of who came up with what exactly, and what may have been plagiarized in these instances. Definitely a rabbit hole for another day, but suffice it to say, that mess needs a deep dive of its own. And I felt like I needed to put it out there that I see that, I note it, and we're getting back to it. And yes, my source for that piece of information is Wikipedia, but this is not an academic paper up for review. This is me fact-checking things I already knew from undergrad and being transparent for my sources. Also, I wanted to use the pretty chart. I am fully capable of academic hoop jumping, believe you me, but showing up imperfectly and all that jazz. Anyway, Erikson's first stage of trust versus mistrust with the existential question of can I trust the world is fairly self-explanatory. Will caregivers show up, let the baby feel secure, have their needs met, and know their parents will not abandon them? The second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this is where the question of is it okay to be oneself arises. In my mind, I combine the second and third stage in particular because toddlers do things at different ages. In an ideal world, they'd be more succinct. However, there are so many 3 to 5-year-olds who still struggle with things like toilet training that I kind of tend to just lump them together. The third stage is that of initiative versus guilt, with the existential question of is it okay for oneself to do, move, and act. Said more simply, these stages are really the point in time where a child learns, I can do the stuff, or I can't do the stuff and I should feel bad about myself because of it. These stages take place at a time where kids are largely figuring out life. They learn to walk, talk, run, cause general havoc, and as much as it might drive you nuts, you need to let them cause some general havoc. It is how they figure stuff out. It is the adults in their lives' responsibility to begin explaining to these children why they can't throw blocks in people's faces, and to redirect them towards activities where they can safely, happily throw things, preferably outside, away from windows. Autonomy and/or initiative without guidelines is just chaos. However, if a child is not allowed to do things, or is repeatedly scolded for attempting to do so, a hesitation forms. When children are allowed to try and fail, and realistically make a huge mess in the process, they start to gain a level of assuredness. I don't need my caregiver to airplane food into my mouth. I think I got this. And just like that, they take over the task, gaining a sense of autonomy and initiative. If the caregiver overcorrects the child's use of said utensil, that can create a sense of shame and/or guilt. If the caregiver does not allow the child to use a utensil for fear that the child will poke his eye out, 1, that caregiver needs to talk to somebody, anxiety sucks, and 2, that child will develop a sense of doubt and fear around whether or not they can safely engage in an activity. The outcome of each stage's crisis gets carried with the child as they grow older. And if that stage's corresponding virtue is not obtained, the individual is likely to continue facing that existential question going forward. More simply, if you feel you can do the things for yourself and it is treated as normal and healthy to do so, you will continue to do the things that will inherently get more complicated as you grow older. But if that did not happen for you in your toddler years, you may end up with a hesitation that will not resolve until you face challenges head on. Make sense? This is the part where people from chaotic households tend to start putting some pieces together. I see y'all. For the rest of you who are like, okay, and that's okay. Stick with me. Additionally, I want everyone to keep in mind here that Erikson's stages are not based in any rigorous scientific studies. It's flawed. Highly flawed. It is an interesting framework to begin the exploration because it opens up the conversation around why some people might be confident while others struggle with self-doubt. Olive, at age 7, rehearsing with Grandpa for the talent portion of a beauty pageant, is navigating the crisis of industry versus inferiority, wrestling with the existential question of whether she can make it in the world of people and things. If Richard was the only influence in Olive's life, I don't think this phase would go well for her. And there are many moments where the family members outside of Grandpa, who is her consistent cheerleader, try to give Olive an out on facing this phase head on. This stage is particularly important, and our culture wildly undervalues just how much 7 to 10-year-olds have to deal with. This stage of development has children wrestling with learning to do things the right way, how to manage more complicated tasks, learning what they are good at, and what it feels like to start feeling independent in small ways. And when that goes wrong, kiddos may feel like they cannot do things correctly. They may view themselves as incapable of managing tasks without others' involvement. They may feel like they are not good at anything. They may lack a sense of self-determination. Dwayne, at 15, is wrestling with the existential question of who he is and who he can be. And when we first meet him, he wants to be a pilot. This phase of development is marked by the psychosocial crisis of identity versus role confusion. Dwayne makes it out of this crisis by having a role model in Frank. Children at this stage can also turn to peers to help them out of this crisis. But having a role model is a net that so many kids desperately need. If we were to pick back up at the film where we left off, we see the family sit down to dinner, where Olive, who is a sweetheart and I love her, asks Frank what happened to his arm. He's willing to tell her, but recognizes the family might not be okay with that. Cheryl proceeds to start telling Olive, only to be interrupted by Richard's asinine remarks. For the first half of the movie, I really hate Richard. We learn that Frank fell in love with one of his grad students, not recommended, and that he is the #1 Proust scholar in the US. Frank lost his job, and the man who his grad student developed feelings for was the second Proust scholar who went on to earn a MacArthur Genius Grant. This man receiving said grant was the event that led to Frank's attempt. Frank states he failed at that as well. In these opening moments, we see how the family is fighting to establish a sense of accomplishment. Or, in the case of Cheryl, Edwin, and Frank, a way to escape after resignation or perceived failure. Frank is Cheryl's younger brother, so we can place him in the early adulthood stage of development, which extends to 44, which is why our modern conception of adulthood is hilarious to me. This stage involves the crisis of intimacy versus isolation. and that existential question of whether you can unite yourself with someone else. It would appear that Cheryl could be stuck in this phase as well, due to her first marriage ending in divorce and her current marriage remaining rocky throughout the majority of the film. We see Frank skip around a bit between this stage and the next of generativity versus stagnation, as he wrestles with his former colleague usurping him. That next stage of development being middle adulthood, with the existential question of how can I make my life count? Richard is firmly within that phase. Edwin, in late adulthood, is focused on reflecting on his life, asking, is it okay to have been himself? Working through ego integrity versus despair. We see that he passes down his wisdom to Dwayne and consistently lifts up Olive. Olive is accepted into Little Miss Sunshine, the beauty pageant, which propels her journey towards competence. The entire family has to go in a van due to financial and safety constraints. Richard tells Olive there is no point in entering a contest unless you think you can win, and then asks her if she is going to win. Again, Richard is an ass. We later see Richard tell the child not to eat waffles a la mode or she will get fat, telling Frank to shut up after explaining what a la mode means in French. The family gang up to encourage Olive to let herself eat ice cream, in a moment that will continue to make me cry no matter how many times I see it. Particularly Dwayne getting all close to her and smirking. Okay, sure, pal, you hate your family. The idea that she is fine to be who she is reinforced by the family in this moment, despite Richard's near derailment. The family begins having fun with each other and having little moments of success. Getting Olive to enjoy the ice cream, getting the broken bus running, Frank openly teasing Richard. However, this fun is interrupted by Richard learning his book deal is dead in the water, and Frank running into the former love interest while buying nudie mags at a gas station. These events force Richard and Frank to reckon with their psychosocial crises, and neither do well initially. This tension has them leave Olive behind, but upon bringing her back in, Edwin tells Richard he's proud of him for trying. Richard softens, and the family drives into the sunset. They arrive at a motel for the night. Richard and Cheryl fight, which amuses Dwayne. I'd like to believe this is because he likes his mother standing up for herself and the family. We see Olive tell Edwin about her fears for the competition. She asks if she is pretty, and shares worries about being a loser. Edwin responds to Olive, in much the same way my own grandmother responded to similar questions I asked at Olive's age. So I cry every time I watch that scene. Again, Olive is reinforced with the idea that she can make it in the world. Zooming through major plot points here. Richard leaves to fix it. Frank gazes at the picture of him with his grad student. Again, sir, don't do that. Edwin takes out his vice, and Cheryl inhales hers, staring into the dark on the balcony. Richard comes to terms with losing the book deal after confronting Stan Grossman. Edwin fatally overdoses, and Richard becomes entirely likable upon deciding to steal his father's body. That is one hell of a sentence. I would argue, and maybe I'm just full of bias as we all are, but Richard was actually okay before he confronted Grossman. I mean, sure, that was a big part of it. He needed to get that out of his system. But his father told him he was proud of him. His father being proud of him allowed him to actually stand up for himself. He turns off the sycophantic bullshit we've seen throughout the film. When his father passes, Richard refuses to let Olive or Edwin give up on the dream of Olive getting to perform. His idea is 1000% unhinged. And the way we deal with grief and death in this country is 100% out of sync with our natural humanity. So, I don't know, I'm here for it. But, disclaimer, do not steal a body. The family throws Edwin's body out the window, smuggles it into a van, and heads off. The family has tender moments in the van, only to be cut off by another vehicle. Outside forces influencing one's reality, yada yada. And the van's horn begins to malfunction, in that it won't shut up. They swiftly get pulled over, with Edwin in the back. But the cop notices his magazines more than the Edwin in the van. So the family goes again. As they approach their destination, Olive is testing Dwayne's vision via the pamphlet she picked up in the hospital. We learn that Dwayne is colorblind, preventing him from being a pilot. At this point, all but Olive have had their dreams and successes snatched away by forces outside themselves. Dwayne had completely dedicated himself to becoming a pilot, only to lose it all due to a common genetic difference. Frank was the preeminent Proust scholar, only to lose his job and be usurped by someone he once viewed as beneath him. Edwin fought in World War II, only to be taken down by drugs. Richard put everything he had into a pipe dream and came out bankrupt. Cheryl puts family above everything, only to have continuous familial strife. The entire family fall on their face and has to let go of every preconceived notion of what it means to succeed, except Olive. Those that came through their stages of development before her refuse to see her fail. The family makes illegal moves. The van falls apart. It barely functions. It's chaotic and noisy, but they get there. The van, an obvious metaphor for the family. They are nearly turned away from the pageant, but through the kindness of a team member, they get in. Olive gets in line to meet Miss California, asking her if she eats ice cream. While flipping through a newspaper, Frank sees an advertisement for his competitor's new book. He and Dwayne are, rightfully, disgusted by the pageant scene and leave. Richard reaches out to a funeral home and is handed a box of his father's belongings. And in this moment, something clicks. The film never states it outright, but it is a feeling that anyone who has been through this moment can recognize. A life, in all its stories, grandeur, heartache, and impact, in the end, can be contained in one singular box. All of the pomp and circumstance, rat racing, and constant pressure seem truly pointless in a moment like that. Childhood beauty pageants are certainly on my top 10 list of unnecessary evils some people seem to think are totally fine. I will not be reviewing any footage of even this fictitious pageant. Instead, I will explain this aspect of the film with a montage of Richard's face. As Richard quickly realizes the horrors of child beauty pageants while sitting in the audience, he grows more and more concerned about what exactly he has pushed Olive to want to win at. He looks around the room in confusion and mild alarm. He only smiles when Olive comes out. She is not polished or poised. She looks like a 7-year-old girl, as she should. Once the swimsuit portion, which I am not even going to try to hide my disdain for, is completed, Olive is once again examining her belly in the mirror as she just watched her peers strut around in two pieces. Olive is aware of others and is wondering if she can make it in the world of people and things, unnecessary things, and the people that buy into them. We cut to Frank and Dwayne on the beach, and this is where we have one of my most favorite lines in all of cinema. But before we get to that, we hear Frank tell Dwayne that Proust was a loser, and that the years he suffered, he came to realize, were the best years of his life because they made him who he was. Let's look at that for a second, because at my core, I'm an existentialist, and there is no way we're breezing past that little nugget. This is the part of the video where I tell everyone to go read Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I average about once a week at giving that recommendation anyway. Particularly now with the constant stream of icy, dark bullshit that we have going on here in the US of A. Averting that tangent, this book shifted everything for me at a point in my schooling where I was questioning the why of it all. Also, totally random, filmy nerd moment here, but there is a connection between Steve Carell and Viktor Frankl in that horribly upsetting show he did, The Patient. There is a scene, the best part of the whole show, really, where he is talking to Viktor Frankl. Anyway, Dwayne goes on a rant against societal bullshit and concludes,
You do what you love, and fuck the rest.
I don't know. That sounds like a pretty good summation of finding meaning to me. Olive's performance is 100% inappropriate, but somehow it is the most innocent and honest, not because of the routine itself. Grandpa was clearly nuts, but because Olive is clearly just a child dancing her heart out. She has not been painted up and sculpted. She is having fun. As staff inevitably try to get her off the stage, her family jumps up and joins her routine, making it even better for Olive. Olive does not care that she does not win. Olive is happy to have her family tell her she rocked, tell her they are proud of her. And they have to promise to never enroll her in a pageant in California ever again. So she did win. Failure, and I put that in heavy quotations because I genuinely don't believe in it, at least in the way Richard does, maybe in a Proustian way. Proustian? Proust, I don't know. But failure is how we learn. Failure is how we become. And failure, if we let it, can make us recognize that validation can only ever come from within. And external validation, while on some level we deserve it from our loved ones, will always become a trap. And that, right there, is the core of self-esteem. Having a sense of internal validation that cannot be taken away based on any form of reception. Dwayne's obsession with Nietzsche and Frank's career studying Proust are further reflective of the central message of the film. The self is an amalgamation. It is not static, nor is it singularly defined. I am not going to pretend to be an expert in Nietzsche or Proust. Far from it, in fact. But I did do some digging with the small context clues we had. If you happen to know more, please enlighten us in the comments. I would love to know more. We welcome info dumps over here. Nietzsche rejected the idea of a singular, pure self, from my understanding. He believed that the self is something that is constantly out of reach of description, almost ethereal. For your true being lies not deeply hidden within you, but an infinite height above you, or at least above that which you commonly take to be yourself. In the same essay, Nietzsche said, "Let your youthful soul look back on life with the question, what have you up to now truly loved? What has drawn your soul upward, mastered it, and blessed it too? Set up these things that you have honored before yourself, and maybe they will show you, in their being and their order, a law which is the fundamental law of your own self." I really prefer Dwayne's translation. Do what you love, fuck the rest. In terms of Proust, who, I'm going to be quite honest, gives me a headache. He viewed the self as essentially so layered that we cannot pinpoint a unique, singular self.
Ogres are like onions.
We inherently have multiple facets of ourselves that we share in common with at least one other person. So putting Nietzsche and Proust together, we are the sum of all that has happened to us, all who we have known, all who we hope to be, and more, with facets of ourselves showing up in different situations with different people at different times in our life. There is a conditioned aspect of self-esteem that must be emphasized. And in order for me to make sense of what I'm saying here, I need to paint a picture for you. A family has 2 children. One child struggles to do well in school. Teachers are unkind to them, and as a result, family and friends make a huge effort to reinforce just how wonderful this child is in other life domains. This child decides that school is not for them, that they are stupid, and that they must do other things in order to remain useful and loved. The second child excels at school and strictly receives praise for how smart they are. This child develops a sense of superiority over their sibling, but only in this domain. Therefore, this child pushes themselves to excel further in academics. When this child receives a poor grade, loved ones react by asking the child what went wrong. How could they do poorly on a test? They never do poorly on tests. This child feels immense shame, beats themselves up for being stupid, and thus this child continues to strive for perfection, neglecting other aspects of their life in the process. I am fully aware that I just triggered all formally gifted kids and all kids that struggled in school, potentially with ADHD. It's okay, friends. I'm in that story. That's why I know it so well. It wasn't until I became an adult that I realized that this is what was stupid. And it was when I was pursuing becoming a teacher that I saw how this becomes instilled in children. Clearly, I didn't become a teacher. Don't get me wrong, there are wonderful teachers out there, and I shadowed with at least one. However, I decided then that I wanted to be on the other side of this. I did not want to become part of a system seemingly designed to tear children down. Seriously, how did we mess up a concept as straightforward as school? Anyway, the results of this conditioned response, children with lower self-esteem are more likely to drop out of school and less likely to receive a college degree than their peers. That study is 20 years old. Good Lord. Okay, but it still applies. I'd just wager that the numbers are more dramatic than what we saw then. PhDs, get on that, please. General self-efficacy, meaning an ability to believe you can do the damn thing, is a large part of self-esteem. If you enter into a task thinking, I'm not good enough, you are less likely to put in the effort to become good enough. It becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy of absolute bullshit. You have to have a certain level of self-esteem to attempt the thing, see it absolutely foobar, and go, well, that didn't work, let me try again. And that is the only surefire way to get better at something. You gotta fall on your face, Hopefully not literally. Pick yourself back up and try again. And this is where that old adage of try again is so crucially important. If you give up, you have not tried long enough to see yourself improve. With all that being said, I only skimmed the surface here today. This video opened the door to so many further discussions. Body image, family systems, the notion of keeping up with the Joneses, how to move forward when a dream is crushed, the work of Viktor Frankl, and the one I didn't expect, the theft of indigenous wisdom. But that topic is the sleeper agent we never planned for, but always seems to pop up. I want to hear what you would like to see covered. Self-esteem is a highly debated topic. We do not have concrete answers. The research, even within only the last 20 years, constantly argues with itself. What is evident, however, from my few years in the field, is that self-esteem is of the utmost importance, regardless of what any study concludes. If you are struggling with low self-esteem, change is so possible. I really want to emphasize that, because I know there are studies that say it is fixed, but I can assure you it is not. I have seen the change within myself and with dozens of other people. The shift is almost certainly not the panacea it was suggested to be in the 90s, but without it, we give up. We try nothing new. We resign ourselves to the status quo. And I don't know about you, but I'm damn sick of the status quo. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Remember that you are capable, you get to make your own meaning, and that you are worthy of self-love. Bye.